Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. If you are new here, I highly recommend going and checking out my other videos in this playlist from my mental health awareness after you watch this video. And if you like my content, don't forget to subscribe because I will be releasing more videos on mental health awareness every Sunday at 7 p.m. Make sure you stay till the end of the video to find out what our video is going to be next week. Number one is that they can be more emotionally volatile, and by that I mean they can be more of a tendency to cry, more irritable, more frustrated. Are you walking on eggshells around them? Are you tiptoeing around them and making sure that you don't upset them or aggravate them? Aside from that, it can actually go the other way and they can be a lot more emotionally repressed. I definitely went that way in some ways, in that I couldn't physically cry, even in situations that would warrant me to cry, so it can go either way. Number two is actually connected to number one. They're all kind of intertwined really. So with number two, they can be closed off emotionally and physically and isolate themselves. So if there is somebody that you live with, like a roommate for example, and they are spending an awful lot of time in their room when they normally would come out and socialize with you guys, if they are cancelling on social events or not agreeing to social events when they normally would, that is a big sign that something's up with them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're depressed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're mentally unwell, but it means that they're going through a tough time anyway, regardless. And it means that they need your support, your extra support than normal. And then obviously, number three is connected again, and that is where because they can be emotionally shut off and because they can isolate themselves, it really has an impact on their relationships, whether it's their romantic relationships or their family or friendships. Number four is loss of confidence, and that is kind of connected to the hopelessness and the worthlessness that you feel when you are depressed. It makes you lose your confidence in yourself completely, and that can factor on not wanting to leave the house, not wanting to go out, not wanting to socialize, because when you're not confident in yourself and you don't feel like you have any worth to give to anybody, you're not going to want to go out and socialize. Number five, changes in appearance. So changes in personal care, less hygienic, less shower, less effort with makeup or hair or clothes. Important factor is less. So if they normally don't care that much about their appearance and they still don't care that much about their appearance, then that doesn't really tell you anything. Whereas if they normally gel their hair if they're a guy, or style their hair for a girl if they're a girl, if they normally go to the gym a lot or take care of their body, eat well, if their appearance is changing for the worse and it's abnormal for them, then that's obviously a red flag. Now this kind of connects back to the video, my previous video that I did with it, which is signs of depression aimed at people who are wondering if they're struggling with depression. So the videos are going to sort of overlap a little bit. I'm trying not to make them overlap too much, but it's just the way it is, because obviously I'm telling sort of the same similar signs, I'm just trying to tell them from two different perspectives. Number six is reckless behavior, and this is actually one that's a sign that most people wouldn't notice in themselves as much, and that can consist of driving erratically, just not having concern for yourself, like walking across the road without looking where you're going, to the point of abusing alcohol and drugs, either excessively, more than usual, or if they don't normally do that. And this reckless behavior can be connected to the sort of suicidal, hopeless behavior that is seen in depression, in that they feel hopeless, they don't really see much of a future for themselves. So even if they're not actively suicidal, there's still that sort of passive suicidal behavior in a way, and that is where they don't care what tomorrow brings. They're not concerned about tomorrow. Number seven is slowed speech and slowed thinking. I think it's connected to the lower energy that you feel when you're depressed. You obviously feel really drained and like you don't want to do a lot of different things, and I think that can also impact then how quickly you would do things and how quickly you would speak as well. Your brain, I think, slows down a little bit. Everything just gets a little bit slower, and that isn't always the case for everybody. And sometimes it's not very noticeable, sometimes it's quite subtle, really. And a lot of these symptoms can be quite subtle. So if you're here and you're starting to realize, oh my goodness, these are all actually things that I have noticed in this person, but I never really made the connection, that is totally normal. That's why I'm here making this video, because maybe it'll make you make a connection that you hadn't made before, and maybe it won't. But I'm just hoping that it'll help somebody out there. Number 8 is kind of more of a specific one. It's not going to be the same for everybody, and it is a little bit connected to the reckless behavior, and that is unusually accident prone. So I'm quite clumsy and I would drop things a lot and that sort of thing. What I mean by unusually accident prone is more the sign they might be self-harming. So when I was self-harming, I got very, very good at covering it up and lying about it. And I came up with these like long stories about like what happened and how I ended up with these like cuts on my arms and stuff. I didn't want anybody to know that I was inflicting them on myself. And I remember actually distinctly telling my mum a very long-winded, crazy, funny story about how I managed to get these cuts on my arm, and she believed it, because of course she would. Because firstly, why would she think that I was self-harming myself? And especially with the way I was talking, I was telling a funny story and I was smiling and laughing, and so of course she's going to believe what I was saying. And I got very good at coming up with excuses and reasons for a lot of my behaviors and a lot of things that were going on for me. So, but just be aware that if this is something that's happening quite frequently, if somebody's frequently injuring themselves by accident, it may not be an accident. Of course it could be, they could be just a very clumsy person, but if you know them well enough and long enough, and they don't usually have that clumsy personality, that is definitely a red flag for something. If it's not. So I just want to reiterate that this is not an exhaustive list, and I actually want to point towards a YouTube channel that I have been watching for a couple of months now, and she has just uploaded a video about her struggle with postpartum depression, and I found it very interesting because she was describing symptoms that were very different to what I had experienced with depression and postpartum depression. And it just goes to show that it doesn't affect everybody the same. It's very different for different people, and that is why when you suspect it, you should always, if it's you should always go and see the doctor, because they're the ones that know the best. And if it's somebody else, you should always urge them to go and see somebody about it, because there is help out there, and it does work. And why would you suffer when you don't have to? There's also the factor that if you don't get it dealt with, it could fester and just get worse. Yes, it could go away, but most of the time it doesn't, and it just keeps going, and it just gets rooted deeper and deeper into your brain, and it gets harder and harder to cope with. And that's where the resulting factor can be suicide, and we don't need any more of that in the world. So anyway, I'm going to link to her channel in the description as well, because I think her input is very powerful, and I think when we all start speaking about our mental health struggles and how it affects each individual differently, it means that other people can feel like they're not alone, and that there's somebody else dealing with it in the same way that they are, and it might just prompt people to go and seek help when they normally wouldn't have. So I just think it's really important for people to speak about their own experiences and how differently it affects different people. So I definitely recommend checking out her channel and seeing what you think of her experience of postnatal depression as well. I thought it was very interesting, and I actually realized that I had some of those symptoms as well, but I didn't put them down to postnatal depression. I had put them down to something else. Just because somebody's showing these signs or not showing some of these signs, it doesn't definitively prove either way whether they are struggling or not. This is just to give you an idea of whether they might be. At the end of the day, the only way you'll know for sure is by going and getting them seen by a professional. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope the video was helpful, and let me know if it was helpful for you guys. Give it a like if you liked it, share it to anybody you think it might be useful to, and leave me a comment of your experiences with depression and whether you think the signs that I have said are a good, accurate depiction of what depression is like. And finally, like I'm always saying in every video, please subscribe if you are interested in this content, because I will be